The Thabo Mbeki Foundation and the University of South Africa hosted the 12th International Women's Day Dialogue. Now, this event took place under the theme Gender and Wealth Creation, Multidimensional Approaches to Poverty Eradication. Nobel Laureate Professor Yunus was the keynote speaker for this year's virtual International Women's Day Dialogue. And the dialogue was facilitated by Masego Madzwamuse. The panel included people like Professor Lulama Makhubela, who's the managing director of the African Research House, and Dr. Luz Helena Hanauer, who is the executive director of Women's Development Business Trust. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Thabo Mbeki Foundation board member Gloria Serobe. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you.
So this has become quite an important event on the Thabo Mbeki Foundation calendar. Just give us an overview of why the gathering. What is the dialogue about generally?
So the dialogue this year is around poverty and the coexistence of poverty with women as well. So because it's also the International Women's Month. And for that, the foundation invited Professor Yunus, who's the founder of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, whose whole thesis was about he had to do something to defy the banking system for disqualifying poor people from the system, and did the opposite of what the banking system does, which is that people don't need to have a collateral to get loans, firstly, and two, for them, the more poor, the more attractive to Grameen Bank as a client. And they also did something, they say that the banks need to go to people as opposed to the other way around. And so they have the village concept as well in terms of where they are placed. And so the whole traditional approach to poor people and banking was his theme. In fact, the main thing he says is that the poor people are not the perpetrators of poverty. They are actually the victims of poverty. And so the banking system needs to take this into account and stop making them as these people who are responsible for this and disqualifying them. So that was what the theme of the topic today was. And what we are saying is that until you change the banking system, you cannot eradicate poverty. That is his main theme. A great person to have this subject because he has done it. Grameen Bank has done exactly that, actually putting women at the center of microcredit and the correct things to do. And over 90% of his clients are women. And he also says the payback method, women are good in settling loans. They are good in settling debts. And so it's a formula that he was hoping that by now the traditional banks will copy from him, but it doesn't look like that has happened.
All right. So I think you've answered my next question in parts, and it's really to speak directly about what are some of the challenges that the current interventions have presented that have made it difficult for women to succeed in the mainstream economy. So what needs to have changed? I think you've started to talk about the banking system almost needs to be disrupted in many ways. What other things are in the way?
So let me just start by saying, Peter, you know, of all the things we can accuse this government for, it's not this one. I think on the gender policy, they've been very, very vocal on it for years. In fact, it was not surprising that this was organized by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation because precisely during his time, he championed this cause quite strongly. Plus, next to him, Mrs. Mbeki, in her own right, took up the challenge of the women empowerment and attempted to mimic the Grameen Bank and formed a Women's Development Bank. This is as early as 1993, I think. So somewhere we have to say that the current government, I'm talking policy now, that we are not found wanting on the issue of the policies. All the charters have got women as a clause in them. And so the challenge really that is there in front of us, and I'm not saying that government shouldn't do more, I'm just saying that we have to acknowledge that too. The challenge that I see, Peter, is that as the women there, we need to understand that the battle is in all fronts. By that I mean, some of us are in boards and some of us are in management, some of us are running their own businesses. And so somewhere in there, we need to create the noise wherever we are and carry the rest of the women behind us as much as possible. And so if you are in the bank board, you need to be curious about why is it that women fail to qualify for loans. If you are working in the bank, you need to be curious about what happens in this credit process in the banks. What is it that we are failing to pass the test? And make a meaning out of that. Then you have the other line, which is about creating the pipeline for our own women professionals, lawyers, CAs, and so on. If we do all of that and we coordinate all these efforts, knowing that we have a friendly policy environment, I think we will go quite far. It is difficult, no doubt, and maybe our colleagues in private sector still need to actually buy into this too as well. It's quite a challenge here.
Do you think that we need policies that are deliberately, I'm looking for the right word, that favor women, that actually say, right, if you've got a man and you've got a woman, for the woman, that certain rules can be relaxed a little bit? I'm looking at the National Credit Act, for example. So women rarely have access to property, and so they don't have ability to offer that as collateral, whereas a man might inherit because he's the male son and that kind of thing. So it looks as if women are always at a disadvantage. Can the rules be then disrupted to assist women?
So I think because I'm 62 years old, so let me just declare that in terms of age, I'm too old. It might be that some of the things I'm going to say here are not received very well. I do not think that we should have a specific thing for women in that fashion. The reason I'm saying that is, after all is said and done, you still have to have a perfect banking system. You still have to have a perfect business environment. We still have investors that must come to South Africa and do business here. So we can't have rules all over the place. All that I think we need to have is that the emphasis should be that now that the policy is actually there, the implementation of those policies have got to be monitored and made sure they work. We were careful with the charters, for example, that precisely the question you're asking, that let's have the charter which has got reference to women, but let's not break down things. Let's use the policies that we've got to make it work for women. Now, as I'm saying that, we have to fight it in all fronts and make sure that the example I would give, for example, Peter, is that all over the world, there are three types of investors who drive the economy. It's the banking sector, it's the insurance sector, it is also the retirement industry. Those three are dictators to how the economy of any country goes because they are the biggest investors. In that case, we have to say that women have got to be closer to those three players. I'm not saying the other sectors are not important, but those three players, because they redirect and direct how the country's economy goes. We need to be very closer to that. Asset management is one of those areas. And I think in our being busy, Peter, an interesting deal was done this week where the African women CAs became shareholders in Future Growth. Now, Future Growth is a rare asset. It's a highly prized business as an asset manager. It's a very unique kind of asset management. In fact, it gets closer to what we're trying to do in terms of redirecting the economy of the country because of where they play as an asset manager. So if you look at that, the African women CAs are now shareholders of Future Growth, and because they are already processed, they are CAs, it's going to be easy for them to learn how that business works. So the challenge to them is to say, you've done the deal now. Get your hands dirty. Get insight. Learn why Future Growth is successful. Try to get into the system and be the authority at some point. And this is really, for me, I'm emphasizing more on what we should now do, because the policy is there already that is friendly. I'm not saying it is easy, Peter, but we have to talk about, on our side, what are we putting onto the table on this matter of, as opposed to what I would call short-term kind of quick fix kind of thing. So you fix women, now you've disrupted something quite immaturely. You are also talking to a disruptor, though, because that's what, as we have done. And the reason we are in agriculture, for example, is because we had a need to disrupt that industry, and we have. And the reason we are in the cement business is because, again, that sector is not friendly to women. We have disrupted that, and we are there. So you are actually talking to a disruptor, but I want us to disrupt in the system and not have short-term fixes, because it's going to come back and bite us again.
All right, and that's great. And also, as you said at the beginning, women also need to be leading from the front and helping other women to fight the good fight. I do fear that there are still some biases, though, that need to be overcome, and some of these might be subconscious. When a man looks at a woman's application, he might be already circumspect just because she's a woman. You often see women walking into a boardroom, for example, and the last assumption that someone makes is that she could be the chairperson of the board. And I just wonder if we have to work also on attitudes, preconceived ideas, and prejudices that might be subconscious even, to help the fight that women have.
I've been in boardrooms a lot, and I have seen that madness of being ignored and all of that kind of thing. The difference there is that, Peter, when we go into these boardrooms, we have to understand that you are now joining the war zone. You don't relax so quickly. And this war zone says, for example, if you are in the board and the chairman ignores you, for example, which sometimes happens, remind him that he is the chairman of the board. Your hand is up too, and he needs to take your views onto the table. Because in the end, the board members don't own these businesses. So if you are in the bank board, remind everybody in the room that we are talking about depositors' monies, not your mother's monies. And so there's no reason for people to have these attitudes willy-nilly as if we are talking about their family monies. These are depositors' issues. These are depositors' monies. And that money has to go do the right thing. So you cannot exercise your gender hatred or your racism through something that you do not own. You just have to remind your colleagues that we're in the life companies. The big client here is the policyholders. And so those attitudes, leave them at home with your wife. I'm not your wife. I'm here. I'm a board member, and I am going to be heard. So I think, but we have to talk more and share these notes with each other, and use our platforms to actually make it easy for the woman coming behind you. Because at this point in time, I don't expect boardrooms to have those kinds of attitudes that they had in 1992, 93. It's now 2022. There should be change. But we should share these notes and we should out those types of leaders who are still exercising that. And by the way, if in a board a CEO is not supportive of women, it should be fired, by the way. Because in the end, we're also saying that the women in this country are the majority. The economy is going to come and go, and is going to be dictated to by women, by sheer volumes. It is a historical issue that, in spite of how much of a majority we are the minority in business in the mainstream economy. That's a historical issue. But now that we have policies next to us and a government that seems to think that is important, we need to exercise that toughness in the boardrooms.
All right. Thank you so much indeed. I wish we could talk for longer, but time is not on our side. But thanks so much indeed for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. Good night. That's Thabo Mbeki Foundation board member Gloria Serobe talking to us about the dialogue Thabo Mbeki Foundation and UNISA had about women and wealth creation, and that dialogue took place today.